Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Clay. And you know, if you're doing this on a regular basis, the slogan for this show is there's power in numbers with the positive change, purchasing corporate LLC capital power for your financial benefit. Positive change purchasing corporate LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically black colleges and universities, to utilize black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses, to address the high energy costs at our historically black colleges and universities, to utilize black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And you know, if you're joining us, ladies and gentlemen, on a regular basis, that I'm your host, Ronald Bethay, and welcome back to the airways and the platform of the online digital radio, the Positive Change online digital radio TV radio network. Ladies and gentlemen, we have had a very interesting and exciting week last week, and we're going to take a look back at Climate Week 2026 here in the DMV market area as we look at three separate events that were put on here in the Washington metropolitan area. And many of you know, if I am now, yes, wearing some of the day apparel that was given at the uh, event that was put on here in Washington, D.C., and highlighting the Energy Week forum that was held here at the historically Howard Theater here at Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a loaded show for you today, and we're going to jump right on into our platform in terms of our what we have scheduled for you today here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. As we take a look back at last week at Climate Week 2026 here in the Washington metropolitan area. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on Tuesday of last week, I had the privilege of attending an event that was held here at the University of Maryland in College Park. They had their Climate Week event that was put on by the Maryland Clean Energy Center, which it serves as the green bank for the state of Maryland. And there was a litany of topics and events that were basically shared at the event. So anyone who's interested, you'll be able to go to our online digital webcast channel, and you'll be able to read the actually agendas that I have posted for the event that was some of the events that took place at the Maryland Clean Energy Center, which this event was held at the Stamp Student Union on the University of Maryland's campus. And we had an opportunity to hear from the senators. We had an opportunity to hear from elected officials. We and as well as public officials such as the Secretary of the Department of Energy, administration here in the state of Maryland and from the head of the environmental justice division for the state of Maryland, which is being, both of those agencies are being run and headed by two dynamic African American women. Uh, and that in itself, in today's climate, is what is diversity, equity, and inclusion in its greatest form, because our African American women, they do an outstanding job in the work that they do, in the roles that they play in the clean energy sector. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about a number of the events that took place and highlight some of the actual things that took place. Now, at the event that was held at the University of Maryland uh, this past week, the first of many to come grants was presented. Maryland Innovation Accelerator announced its first investment through Climate Technology Founders Fund. Now, this fund is going to be funded by basic pass-throughs. And that's one of the reasons I went, because I wanted to find out how was our state legislatures proposing that this monies fund these various projects. And me, as someone who is very, very passionate about my own community, the African American community and Hispanic communities and other communities of color, how are they getting the information out to those constituents and businesses so that they could participate in these various programs? The Maryland Energy Innovator Accelerator, a program of the Maryland Clean Energy Center, announced its first investment through Climate Technologies Fund in a high T-Tech based in Beltsville, Maryland. Now, there you'll be able to find this information on my website, and it goes right into the company's website. It says High T Tech, breaking down technology, world changing materials. And it goes on. High T Tech's patent ultra fast high temperatures of 3,000 centigrade in seconds, not hours, but precise, uniform, and scrappable control for dramatically reduce physical and energy footprint. Our progress is just faster. It unlocks materials and performance previous out of reach. You're talking about, based on innovations, Professor Lihenbig enables the creation of novel and advanced materials to replace legacy, low yield, high cost materials. Now, you'll be able to find this information on our website at Positive Change at pc.com. That's Positive Change at pc.com. Now, this is a company that's located in Beltsville, Maryland, which is very, very close to the University of Maryland. The startup develops advanced catalysts and battery materials using a patented ultra fast, high temperature censoring process. The investment is part of this CTFF, which supports minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses and creates solutions to address climate change and to accelerate the transformation of clean energy economy in Maryland. High Tech has created processes that produce materials and batteries for batteries and industrial equipment much faster, more efficient, and more sustainable than traditional methods. The approach allows them to utilize new materials and a larger, more durable, and less expensive. It is less expensive while using less energy and fuel scarce resources. The inaugural investment from the Climate Technology Fund Founders Fund marks a pivotal moment for the program as the commitment of fostering diverse leadership in the climate tech sector, said Ben Margold, director of MEIA. By supporting innovators like high tech, we are not only advancing cutting edge technology, but also ensuring that clean energy transforms in Maryland, inclusive and economically transformative. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, without me reading all of this information, I just wanted to touch on this landmark event in terms of the first grant. Now, I asked a very pointed question to one of our state legislators who in fact sponsored the legislation to create such a fund. And he said that this would come through by penalizing the fossil fuel industry for not meeting certain mandates that are state legislative mandates to the Maryland State Renewable Portfolio Standard legislation, which all 50 states in the U.S. What was required to have in place by 2025. And Maryland has been moving very, very rapidly in addressing many of these issues. But before that, we need to know a little bit about the Maryland Clean Energy Center and what it does and how it came to form. So, what we're doing right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're basically looking at the Maryland Clean Energy Center advances a clean energy future by making affordable, accessible technologies available to all Marylanders. Through innovative financing, climate tech, and project support, we empower communities, boost economic growth, and create jobs. To Our commitment is to education and stronger economies, creating a healthier, sustainable planet. Now, I had the privilege of having Mr. Damien Tresseport on my last show that I produced here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with his economic impact on Black America. And he went into and talked about various grants, and you can log on to our uh, online YouTube channel and you can listen to his interview in its entirety. But for the day's purposes of today's show, I want to sort of touch upon some of the issues that came out of the portions of the platform which I attended, because it was an all-day forum, and you know how we are as business people in today's world. You can only provide so many hours, and I went as media covering this event. I had the privilege of meeting a number of the companies that participated in the event at the Maryland Clean Energy Center. There was of course, Echo Guard. This company is run by a gentleman, Oliver Tech, Montgomery County Buildings Jurisdictions, which Echo Guard is one of those companies that are trying to address the retrofitting of the building infrastructure in Montgomery County. If any of you are out there, you know Montgomery County is one of the largest county and wealthiest county in the state of Maryland. and it ranks in the top 10 annually if you look in terms of households and incomes. So Montgomery County is one of those counties that is being serviced through the Montgomery County Green Bank, which is a spinoff of the Maryland Clean Energy Center, which they work very closely together. Also, U.S. Plasma Electrified Manufacturing for Sustainable Futures, the platform for extreme temperatures and synthesis and treatment. This was another company, speaker that was at the event that was held at the University of Maryland on College Park. Also, um, we had a privilege of speaking with a number of those companies and to see how they were addressing the solutions that they are trying to come up with. So another company that was at the event as a presenter or exhibitor rather was the Zero Net, uh, which is co-founded by John Willis. Zero Net Energy Systems. They're located in 9841 Washington Boulevard in Gaithersburg, Maryland. They were one of those companies that was also present, and their specialties basically is heating, cooling off the grid. What the system includes is solar thermal collector, thermal energy storage, Stirling engine generator, hybrid thermal chiller, energy recovery, ventilator, active grill, beam system, thermal distribution. Now, the solar thermal collector collects solar thermal energy. The thermal energy storage energy and has heat for a long duration. Stirling engine generator generates electricity from a heat pump. Hybrid thermal chiller converts heat energy into cooling. Energy recovery recovers energy from the air and dehum- it dehumidifies that. High-tech cooling through the active chill beam system, high energy, as we said, efficient cooling, and thermal distribution supplies heat and hot water. The project development status, this patent pending solar thermal building energy solution has successfully advanced through technical validations of collaboration with the University of Maryland Department of Mechanical Engineering Technology and has also attracted grant funding from Maryland industrial partners. Now that Zen's ability to deliver heating and cooling and electricity without PV panels, lithium batteries, or synthetic fragments has been validated through study state theorem modeling. The project is now moving forward on two fronts. Pilot project information. The company is currently looking at pilot project sites for full-scale deployment over the next 2 years. The idea sites are rural public sector buildings such as libraries, community centers, clinics, schools, training facilities, and sustainability focus on institutions and resilience hubs. Building public policy development, recognizing that technical validation alone cannot overcome regulatory market barriers. The company has developed a parallel policy research initiative engaging the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. The gaps between novel technologies like Zen's and current building policy frameworks will address using Zen's as a case study for forward-looking thermal decarbonization policy approaches in buildings. So we have a number of issues, ladies and gentlemen, here in the DMV market area, because you were talking about Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia, which we know is our nation's capital. They all are adjacent to each other, and they all have various policy mandates, which are some of the leading policies in the country around green energy. Now, as I indicated to you, we're talking about the how the Maryland Clean Energy Center came to existence. So their story is very, very interesting. The origins of the Maryland Clean Energy Center was created in 2008 by the state with a transformative vision to spark a future powered by clean energy. The Maryland Clean Energy serves as a catalyst for clean energy revolution, guiding the growth, sustainability, business, unlocking financial services, and sharing knowledge and expertise needed for the state of Maryland to thrive. As a green bank, our directives are rooted in the establishing statute, which empowers us to promote clean energy, provide clean industries, provide financial solutions, and drive meaningful change across the state with visionary foundations we are committed to. Now, there are fueling and expansions, and they're fueling the expansions of clean energy business across the state. They're accelerating the adoption of cutting edge clean technologies, attracting and retaining dynamic companies within the clean energy sector, amplifying Maryland's economy, creating opportunities and prosperity, enhancing health, safety, and wellness of our communities while uh, being nu- nu- nurturing a brighter future for more sustainable future for all. Now, that is some information about the Maryland Clean Energy Center, and you can go there by logging on to mdcleanenergycenter.org. The Maryland Clean Energy Center receives most of the federal funding for the state as relates to various or any federal funding or projects. As a matter of fact, the state of Maryland Clean Energy Center was slated to receive $133 million from the Inflation Reduction Act through three separate grants. One of those grants was known as came from what we call the Greenhouse Gas Initiative. The Greenhouse Gas Initiative was one of the first initiatives that the Biden and Harris administration put into motion by President Biden signing Executive Order 140096 and 14006, which gave rise to the Invest in America agenda, which the Inflation Reduction Act and the Greenhouse Gas Initiative was one of the major pillars of that. Now, we know with the current administration in Washington, D.C., that they are doing everything that they can to undermine and to destroy the clean energy movement, because you have to connect the dots. This is the direct relationship between the tech industry, the fossil fuel industry, and the current administration in office, where there was a meeting held and the person who serves in the Oval Office asks the tech industry and the fossil fuel industry to put up $1 billion for his election campaign. Of course, we know that that is illegal and that there are many ways that they get around campaign finance through what we call PACs. So, with that being said, I don't have to drill down in any deeper in that hole, because we understand how that game is played. If anyone has spent any time in Washington, D.C., We know that the real gunslingers on Capitol Hill are the lobbyists, because they are the ones with the money that influences legislation, and nothing has a bigger grip on Washington, D.C., and our federal, state, and county legislatures than the fossil fuel lobby, with their billions of dollars that they have in order to move forward their agenda, which does not necessarily serve us as Americans citizens well. And when we look at the current administration's proposed 2027 budget, which you will be able to find that information under our news and events tab, you will find that many of the uh, uh, initiatives that were passed have been gutted in terms of the actual financing for those programs. So, with that being said, we're going to keep this program moving today and on this platform in our conversation. But the individuals who were at the uh, event that was held on last Tuesday, many of those individuals I have been working with, such as um, a brilliant Nigerian mind in the person of Malcolm Fabu, who has his company is located in also, I think, Gaithersburg area. Yes, Gaithersburg, Maryland. And he's come up with something called mobile carbon capture, where he's developed a filter that he has patented, and he is trying to scale that. He's been a part of the accelerator at the University of Maryland, and his process, or his very ingenious initiative, is for cars as well as 18 wheelers. And he has developed this as a aftermarket product, which anyone could go and have installed, say at a Jiffy Lube. These are things that he's still working on in terms of getting those contractual agreements worked out with a national chain where people can take their where they take people to get things like oil changes. That's why I mentioned Jiffy Lube. Uh, there, they would be able to change the filter on the from the box that clamps onto any foreign or domestic manufactured automobile. If it's a runs off fossil fuels, it will fit. It has an extension that extends and goes up the tailpipe, and it captures over 90 something percent of those greenhouse gas emissions initiatives, and those things that are escaping from your tailpipe. Now, the genius of this is, after this carbon is collected, they go back to the various branches of the franchise, and they collect that carbon through a process similar to the same process when they change from the newer freons that we use today in air conditioners for automobiles and trucks and vehicles. And they're able to, through the process, purify that carbon into crystals. Then that carbon is sold to various industries. Now, for those folks who like their soda pop, well, when you pop, the top on a soft drink, you see you get a fizz reaction when that top comes off of that bottle or plastic bottle or glass bottle. But that is CO2, ladies and gentlemen. Also, when you they also sell this purified carbon to the cosmetic industry, because when you get perfumes or some type of underarm deodorant that you may be using in a spray can, it's not coming out the can without CO2. All you have to do is look on the side of the the container that the product is in. If it's an aerosol spray, that's what creates mixed with the actual deodorant formula to make it come out of the container that it's in. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, you can see the many different applications that uh, Dr. Fabu has come up with his mobile carbon capture. This is also for 18 wheelers. So, I had was very, very pleased that I was sitting at the same table and was able to have lunch with Dr. Fabu, and I've been working with him on a number of topics and subject matters. Now, all of this took place on Wednesday. I was able to hear from the head of the Office of Environmental Justice in Maryland, very dynamic sister. Uh, you'll be able to get information by going to the Department of Environmental Justice website here in Maryland. She shared some very, very interesting things about what's going on in Maryland with the environment and the various goals and objectives that her department is putting into place to try to combat the environmental injustices that are taking in place in low and moderate income communities here in the state of Maryland. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I had the privilege of hearing from the head of the Department of Energy Administration here in the state of Maryland, another very dynamic African American sister. She spoke about the goals and objectives of her administration at this point in time here under the leadership of Governor Wes Moore. So the state of Maryland, I feel, is in very, very confident hands, and I think they're doing a very good job. There's always room for improvement. We know this, especially when it comes to getting more opportunities for African American and women owned and veteran owned businesses, but here in the state of Maryland. Also, ladies and gentlemen, on the very next day, I had the privilege of being at as I indicated, the historical uh, Howard Theater here in Washington, D.C. And the Green Bank of Washington, D.C., in fact, hosted this event that took place on Wednesday morning. Uh, that event touched on some very, very important issues as relates to DC residents. Now, we all know that the cost of living is rising, utility bills, housing, food. City leaders across the country are grappling with how to make life more affordable for residents while navigating federal policy changes, tightening their budgets, and a tighter credit markets. DC has established itself as a leader in tackling these challenges head on through policies that cut costs for resilience drive uh, resilience drives commerce and advance efficiency clean energy and resilience. Now, this was put on by the Green Bank of Washington, D.C. groundswell in the D.C. chamber. Now, with pioneering new residential developments, bringing jobs in neighborhoods, vitality to every ward in the District of Columbia, the community solar program putting money back into residents' pockets, the C-PACE financing that has helped building owners cut every energy cost. This event will showcase what working, why it matters, and how DC models can serve a roadmap for cities across the country. Local solutions never have been more important. Now, some of the speakers that was there, you had Michelle Moore, who is the CEO of Groundswell uh, Community Power. Miss Moore is the author of Rural Renaissance. She is the CEO of Groundswell and focuses on affordability, quality of life, and kitchen table impacts of American energy sector. An accomplished executive with roots in rural Georgia, Michelle delivers results. With her leadership, Groundswell is building community power to cut the electric bills in half with solar, resilience hubs, and home energy resilience. As a senior Obama White House official, she cut government's energy bills by 11 billion. As a member of the TVA board of directors to support historic $1.5 billion in investment in energy efficiency, reduce costs. As a major senior executive of the U.S. Green Bank Council, she's drove adopt to lead across the $3.5 billion square foot of commercial real estate. Michelle serves as on the board of the Dominion Technology Center. She's worked is grounded in her faith, her commitment to loving her neighbors. Now, this lady I've had the privilege of meeting before, and she does an outstanding job in what she does. Also serving on that panel was Chris Sowell, managing director and founder of Uprise Solar. Chris has worked in the solar financing construction since 2010. He launched the Uprise of 2021, where he has built an all-star team of mission to change the way electricity is delivered to people. Uprise does this by delivering rooftop solar PV battery storage, EV charging stations, and other efficient home solutions to residents in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia DMV market area. Uprising works in building emergency improvements that give everyone an opportunity to rise up and be a part of an all-electric future. Chris uh, and uh, they are. This gentleman is doing a lot of work here in the DMV area, and he was also on that specific panel. Also on that panel, you had Janice Ennis, Jessica Ennis, Senior Vice President of Invest in the Future, which is an outcome focus of leaders of coalitions builders dedicated to accelerating energy deployment and driving ambitious climate actions through strategic partnerships and innovations and solutions. She serves as the senior president of External Affairs on the future of philanthropic initiatives strategy hub committed to expanding clean energy deployment, ensuring that all communities benefit from these transactions. Now, I'm questioning all the credibility of all these folks who are doing this financing. And the reason why I'm doing this, ladies and gentlemen, is because I wear a number of hats. I know I'm in front of this mic right now, and we're producing our platform that we try to do on a weekly basis, and we struggle with being able to get guests to come on our show because many of these individuals who we're talking about in these programs, we are always talking about they're not They have to do a better job. As a little boy said, the hell with the better job. Why isn't the better job already done? This is my position. When I raised the question about why hasn't more money been spent with African American owned media, print, electronic, as well as streaming services to help get the word out on these various programs? Let me be very, very real with this, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking at something that's unprecedented as it relates to what is going on here in Washington, D.C. And one of the sister who is Mrs. Patrick McAney, who's the development director of the Washington, D.C. Somerset Development Company, she also was part of that platform. Uh, this gentleman was part of this platform. But we also have Mrs. Brandy Colander. She is the CEO of the DC Green Bank. This is a very dynamic young sister who leads the DC Green Bank's effort to unlock capital and infrastructure across Washington, D.C., with focus on resilience and community impact. Her commitment and dedications to empowering the partners enlightens her passion and clear vision for expanding organizations and impact. Colander oversees the team's responsibilities for organizational portfolio, direct strategy and operations, and works to build strong partnerships across to public, private, and nonprofit sector. Her career includes executive roles in across sectors. Colander has honor of serving as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Interior and the Deputy General Counsel at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. In the roles, she advised cabinet leaders, regulatory policy, and infrastructure matters on infrastructure matters. In private sector, she has led corporate functions and advised Fortune 500 companies executives. Brandy holds a Juris doctoral master's degree and bachelor's degree based in Washington, D.C. She is dedicated to ensuring the nation's capital delivers opportunities to benefit every ward of the city. Very dynamic, your sister. When I walked into place, I walked straight down on to the floor area where she was holding the mic. And she said, "Well, could you please have a seat?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I would love to. But can't I ask the question?" And that's when I popped my question to the panel about the lack of investment in Black owned media in getting the word out. And I also talked about advocacy organizations. Let's be real, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why these organizations are struggling, all 50 of the green banks around the country, they have formulated a national structure, and most of them who are located in major cities and municipalities, the state attorney general or city attorney general has sued the Trump administration because the Zealand who came, Trump and his criminal cronies, this who he put to run these agencies, were not qualified, many of them, to be in these positions. And he came in, and his whole thing was to wreck the work that was being done through EPA, Department of Interior. And the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which I mentioned earlier in my conversation, was slated to receive $27 billion. $20 billion was to go to the green banks and CDFIs and nonprofits to uh, fund these initiatives in these states and cities around the country. That is is in litigation as we speak. The $7 billion that was in the Solar for All pilot program, which was started here in Washington, D.C. by Mr. Ted Trabue, who's the former director of the DC Sustainable Utility, DCSEU, and Mr. Mark Davis, who is the founder of WDC Solar, and NFL Hall of Famer Darrell Green of the Burgundy and Gold. They're the ones who started the Solar for All pilot in Washington, D.C. Then it was picked up under the leadership of Tommy Wells, who was the director of the Department of Energy and Environment. I've had several meetings and conversations with Tommy Wells over the years. Now, what I see, ladies and gentlemen, is that our politicians need to be very, very, very direct and clear to the citizens, because the way that renewable portfolio standard legislation has been basically structured, the cost of this legislation has been formulated in the form of pass-throughs to the residents. Let me be clear in what I'm in understanding exactly what I mean. In 2016, Mayor Bowser signed the first renewable portfolio standard legislation in our nation's capital into law. It had a 50% threshold that said by 2032, 50% of all energy services, energy that's distributed through PEPCO, the utility, must come from renewable energy sources. For wind, for uh, hydronetics, which is water, and nuclear, that can come from outside of the physical landmass of the District of Columbia. But for solar energy, it has to come from inside the confines of the District of Columbia. Well, anyone knows here, lives here, we know DC doesn't have a whole lot of land. It's very, very, very tight. And we're a part of what we call the PJM region, which is 13 states and the District of Columbia, which has the largest buildup of data centers in the U.S., with Virginia leading the way with a total of 1,501 data centers being already online in those inside those 13 states in the District of Columbia. The state of Virginia leads the nation and leads the way with over 668 data centers already online and in operation. Now, in DC, the legislation was crafted, and we know that the utility company's attorneys were at the table, PEPCO, that PEPCO had to buy what we call green credits, or known as RECs, from their customer base. Well, in order for them to do that, you have to have enough homeowners, property owners of private properties, whether they be commercial or commercial, the federal government or the DC government, with PV systems on their roof, and that energy that is not used on a daily basis. They passed something called net metering legislation, which allows that meter to be able to read and turn backwards if there's any excess energy that's your system on that building or that home didn't use during those hours. And we have different times of the day that there are greater energy demands than others, and it's called peak load. And other times of the day when energy is less expensive. But the fact of the matter is, There are not enough systems. So going back and remembering Mrs. Sandra Fry, who I have a great deal of admiration and respect for. She has the office of the People's Counsel here. She's the lead general counsel for that office. I will never forget her testimony in front of the DC City Council. Pepco can't buy what Pepco can't get. And she was talking about that lack of systems, whether they be on residential or community, commercial properties, on federal government or DC government buildings. There are not enough systems. So there was a shortfall. Now, the way the legislation is crafted, the DC government is able to fine Pepco, but Pepco is allowed to pass those fines and through as fees to the consumer. And in 2016, 17, the first year they had their full year of being able to monitor the Rex market in the District of Columbia, there was a $15 million shortfall, which was passed through to the ratepayers. For fiscal year 2018, there was a $25 million shortfall. Well, that was passed directly through to the ratepayers. At that time, Mrs. Anna Schoolman, who heads a group called Neighborhoods United, at that time it was called DC Sun, came on this platform with Mrs. Betty Ann Kane, who was the former head of the Public Service Commission in Washington, D.C., and says, look, this is the biggest heist without a gun on record. Because what people have to realize that legislation is passed over time. The first legislation as relates to the District of Columbia was signed in 2012, but the council kept adding on to the legislation until it formulated the Renewable Portfolio Standard legislation for the District of Columbia. In 2018, because there was a drastic drop in the value of what we call the REX. Let's be clear, ladies and gentlemen. The money is not in installing solar panels on roofs. Companies that are in the solar installation business, if they're doing rooftop solar, their profit margins are very, very thin. Okay. The 30% federal tax credit that the present administration rescinded rescinded the executive order that was signed by President Biden, which provided a 30% federal tax credit for anyone who put a PV system on the roof, has had a devastating impact on the solar industry. And someone who has served in the capacity, which I have for the past 5 years as president of the National Association of Blacks in Solar, and I am now chairman of their board of directors, I can speak to this. In 23, it started in 24, 25, it speeded up. We had over 13,000 solar installation and design firms. Over half of them have filed Chapter 11 or 13. And they've gone out of the solar industry, and those companies that are left, they are really struggling to diversify their services so that they can survive. I'm going to be very, very candid with you, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking at a scenario where this is happening, and it's no joke. It's in real time as I'm doing this show. So what happened in the District of Columbia was the former head of the Public Service Commission at that time, Mrs. Kane, was livid. And she told the DC Council, you will no longer come to the Public Service Commission and petition to move money from this energy fund to the general fund, and it is used for other purposes which the money wasn't legally raised for in the first place. That money was supposed to help 100,000 low and moderate income residents who live inside the confines of the District of Columbia reduce their energy burden by 50% by year 2032. That is what the law says in the regulation. What I am saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that we have been on a roller coaster ride, because as the district government budget, which was slashed by Commander in Thief by $1 billion when he came in, and they've been playing games with the DC government's budget because Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse, other than when 47 get ready to do something, like starting wars in the Middle East to, in fact, control the flow of natural gas on the worldwide market. Now, let's get real with what all this is about. So, those pass-throughs that I was talking about that have been passed through the DC residents are having habit. But it's not just DC, ladies and gentlemen. This is a national phenomena that is taking place, and nobody is really educating the public concerning this. And it really didn't come to play until 47 came back into office, and then you had the person who heads head Doge and Tesla coming in as the hatchet man, and they fired over 200,000 African American women from their jobs. Let's be clear. This is having havoc in the DMV market area. Now, this plays out at the kitchen table, because the gas, water, because this is not just on your electricity bill when you check your water bill. Now, let's talk about why. Well, data centers, with the high proliferation of data centers, they need a great deal of water to cool off the servers on these computers, these gas turbines. And this amount of water being used, we're talking about over some super scale hyperlink data centers can use as much as 200 million gallons of water in one day. Now, this is playing out. So in the District of Columbia, DC, people we're always the test tube, baby, experiences these rate hikes and these increases. So if you didn't get in on the solar for all program in 2018, in that first group of cohorts, because Mrs. Anna Schoolman's organization, Neighborhoods United, then known as DC Sun, had the contract with DOEE for community engagement and education. Well, they cut that completely out. They have a young man there. I hate to say what I'm saying, but the truth is the truth. His name is uh, Mark Breyer, and he's supposed to be their engagement director. And I don't see the engagement. You know, I've been at several events that they put on, and he's a one man, one person cannot do this work. I know what goes into community engagement. I received the Solar Ambassador Award on Saturday, February 9th, 2019, because I had recruited quite a few people to sign up for the Solar for All program in low and moderate income wards of where we populate the majority of residents, wards 8, 5, 6, and 7. And I have worked all over the District of Columbia. So I'm not talking about something I don't know anything about. I'm talking about not talking about it, but being about it. So, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is taking place in the District of Columbia. And because it has had such an impact, Mayor Bowser pulled the entire budget in 2024, going telling people to get on the waiting list for 2025 because they thought they were going to receive the $62 million grant that they had applied for, such as Maryland had applied for. They were supposed to receive 62 million, but that money was right back. So this has thrown the agency, the DC Sustainability Utility, in dire straits for the District of Columbia, which pays the contractors that do the installs at no cost for low and moderate income residents in the District of Columbia. These are the things that are playing out, ladies and gentlemen. This is some of the information that's playing out, because what is going on in a lot of you had several developers there, and this young man who is a developer. You had a Mark E. James, founder and president of Urban Green. Mark is founder of and president of Urban Green, developing next generation of the DC sustainable housing and renewable energy systems based in DC. Mark has over 25 years in experience in multifamily, single-family housing development, and has completed over $300 million in affordable housing projects throughout Washington and the Mid-Atlantic region. Urban Green emphasizes a more symbolic relationship between built environment and natural environment, and particularly attention to energy efficiency, health, and equitable access to low and moderate income communities. The company is leading the way on development of net zero and net zero carbon housing, and recent completed a cycle of house apartments in the DC region, first certified through net zero light projects that will project 18 units for affordable housing families for low 60% area median income. This is problematic, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have enough affordable housing. There was, and this young man happened to be of Anglo of descent, but he was born in D.C. Now we have a young brother of African American descent born in D.C. who was also on that platform at the Howard Theater. Chanberry Hubbard is he's president and CEO. No, I'm sorry. Mark E. James, he's president and founder of Urban Green, and Patrick Passman, president of Post Brothers. Matthew is a co-founder of Post Brothers, a real estate investment development management company with similar unique expertise in urban real estate development. And then we had Patrick Prestone, who's the he's a Post brother. Matthew Prestone is co-founder of Post Brothers, a real estate investment development and management company for singular and unique expertise in urban real estate development. Matthew serves as president of the company, engaged in sponsorship of 40 Class A multifamily mixed units for real estate development projects, comprise over 8,000 units that are operating under the deployment of disposable plus 700K office retail space with total capitalization of $4 billion. Now, These are some heavy hitters, ladies and gentlemen. What I am going to tell you is what, if you weren't there or if you didn't go to the website for the DC Green Bank and listen to, because it was filmed and videoed at the Howard Theater. Developers for low income aren't coming to DC. They're not going to put a dime in DC. And the reason why is because 10% of all their rentals ain't paying rent, and you can't get the people out the units. Now, this played out on the stage, and the current director of the Green Bank of Washington, D.C., she wanted people to know what the problems are. Also, Mayor Bowser, she did speak at the as a keynote at the end of the uh, forms, several of the forms. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to move on to the last event I attended on Wednesday. As you can see, I was very, very busy this past weekend. Now, I attended a event that was put on by the Greater Washington Clean Cities Collaboration Group, which is here in Washington, D.C. They have an office here, and they're in the 71 other cities. There's 72 offices around the country. But the leader of the Green Bank, not the Green Bank, but the Greater Washington Clean Cities Collaboration Group here in Washington, D.C., is Antoine Thompson, who is someone who I know. I consider him a friend, and his organization does outstanding work around EV charging and buses and getting funding in place for the public school systems in the District of Columbia, Fairfax County, Howard County, Baltimore County, City of Baltimore. They have done an outstanding job around getting millions of dollars to buy electric buses for public school systems here in the DMV area. Now, they had an Earth Day event also, and a very, very dynamic sister who's on their board of directors, Mrs. Cheryl Pons, who is the founder of Diatech. She, in fact, put on the event uh, in for the Greater Washington, D.C. She was the host for that. Now, this was for their climate week. There are also a number of green jobs that you will be able to find if you are going to our job fairs, that you'll be able to find that the Greater Washington Clean Cities Collaboration Group does job fairs here. And that is, we need employment for so many of our dynamic sisters that's been laid off here living in the DMV area. They need to be able to go to positivechangepc.com, click on our news events tab, and we post information that are posted about job opportunities in the green energy sector. Now, this particular forum was entitled Energy in Innovators in Action: How Climate Entrepreneurs and Legacy Businesses Are Building the Next Generation of Clean Energy Jobs. Now, Cheryl Pons of Diatech Technology runs an EV charging company. She's done over 300 EV charging structures in DC. But one young lady who I was very, very impressed with, she has a company called Hempsolation. Uh, I'm going to pull up some information with her name on it, because I've sent her a letter asking her if I could arrange a Zoom call with her, with some people who are very, very much interested in partnering with her organization here in the DMV market area. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, uh, we have been working tirelessly, as you can see, on attending events and trying to bring back and get this information out to you, our listening audience here on the platform of Solar Now and the future with its economic impact on Black America. Now, the young lady her name is Delisha Gunn. She's a founder and CEO of Hempsolation. Now, you'll be able to log on to her website and get some information about the exciting things she is doing. Let me give her props. This young lady has a engineering degree from Howard University in sustainable energy. She majored in that at Howard University, and she, in fact, has, been able to get her company, up and running, and she's attempting to build a manufacturing facility here in the state of Maryland, which I find to be very, very exciting. And it's something that anybody that's building manufacturing, that's creating job opportunities, as bad as we need those job opportunities for our community at the present time, I'm all for finding out how we here at the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative and the National Association of Blacks in Solar can be of assistance. So that's what we've done. We've written them a letter and reached out because one of our board members who is in the financing arena, Mr. Tony Henderson, is back on the airways to sort of these issues and these things uh, as we are trying to navigate at the same time, communicate to you, our listening audience, what is going on and what has taken place uh, on the platform of Solar Now and the future with its economic impact on Black America. We have been very, very, very busy working, trying to get these things accomplished. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of another show. But what her company does, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, she manufactures wall insulation for homes, businesses, installation like you would see going into construction out of hemp, which is a biodegradable material that will not mold. And she went on to explain, say you get a busted pipe in your wall, with what we currently have been traditionally using this fiberglass installation with this cotton mixture. You got to throw that stuff away once it gets wet. Ain't nothing you can do with it but throw it in the trash. With the installation that she has developed and patented, it does not mold. You can take it out of the wall, lay it out on a platform, let it dry, and put it back in the walls. So that saves a lot of money for companies that are in the construction industry. So we reached out to them, and she was there. We also had two other presenters there, and because of the shortness of time, we have now come to the end of another exciting edition, believe it or not, of Solar Now and the future with its economic impact on Black America. You know, I'm your host, Ronald Bethea, and you know every week that this show is brought to you by the Black Sports Legends Foundation, online digital HBCU radio talk show initiative. You can get more about that initiative, ladies and gentlemen, by logging on to our website. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that I have just embarked and entered as a acquisition marketing person with Think Energy, which is based out of Chicago. They are a customer acquisition company. And I'm going to do a show on customer acquisition for the renewable energy industry. This industry is slated to do $25.6 billion this year. And most people won't even know if people have a tendency of using a lot of initials to define stuff, CAC. Well, it's called customer acquisition. What it costs a company to secure a customer before they sign a contract and they receive monies from that person to install a PV system on that roof or anything else. But this is a very, very lucrative industry. The issue is, why hasn't black folks created technology platforms to, in fact, drive members to signing up for programs such as community solar, which would be one of the initiatives. And the important thing about this, ladies and gentlemen, is that it doesn't cost a dime for people who are living in deregulated states. They are part of the PJM region. The PJM region has 13 states in the District of Columbia. Well, 12 of those states in the District of Columbia, they have passed legislation where community solar, and community solar is simply this, ladies and gentlemen. It was designed, and the fossil fuel industry who built these large wind and solar farms received the bulk of the funding. But they're supposed to provide what we call green credits, which are electricity. It takes 1,000 kilowatt hours to make 1 kilowatt hour at a discounted rate for people who live in apartments, who don't have homes that they own. And this is available for people who own homes, who have PV systems on their roof, anyone who pays a utility bill with their local utility provider can qualify for this, and it don't cost you a dime. Well, we have a problem, as they say in at NASA. NASA, we have a problem. If nobody knows about it, it don't make no difference what you putting out there. Well, yours truly is now engaged with that, and I will provide for you my sign up page. So anyone who's interested in going and signing up for community solar, you can do that right now. I am an energy advisor with Think Energy, and I'm going to give it to you based on the company's guidelines in terms of we don't make claims that aren't true. And if you don't understand it, I ain't gonna try to, because I'm not selling anything. I'm just passing information on about community solar programs that already is available for people to sign up to take advantage of, but they are unaware of the fact that they can get a reduced cost on their electricity bill. Now, that percentage varies in various states. So I'm not getting ready to open up that whole that, as we say, can of worms at the very end of my show without having someone on to come and lay this out. But I will be bringing a guest on from Think Energy in the very near future to talk about this customer acquisition industry and their company, Think Energy Plus, which is based out of the state of Illinois. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I indicated to you I would give you the sign up page for that. Give me 1 second here. I've got to get into that particular email to get that information for you. Let me get into that box that I have the information in, file that I have the information in, so I can give you the correct information on my sign up page. Okay. Let me see here now. Let me see. I'm still looking for that information. All right. Okay. That will be inside of my website. Just give me a second for me to get there, and I will provide you with that information. I will provide you with that particular information. Just 1 second. Here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. All right, let me get this in. And I will be more than happy to share more data with you in the very near future on the opportunities that are available for you uh, through the Think opportunities. We are just getting started with this, ladies and gentlemen, and I am very excited. I am very excited around this opportunity. So if you don't put it in right, it's not gonna come up. That's one thing about the process. It doesn't change. It seems as though I'm having some difficulty signing in this morning to my site. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to try and see if I wrote that information down here so I can give that information to you before I go off the air. You have to, as a little boy, you have to be a little patient with me because I don't have an engineer, ladies and gentlemen. We have to do it all here on this platform, Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. We are charged with the whole deal. So I'm looking at the sign-in page for me, and I can't find it right now. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to close this episode of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America because I, believe it or not, have to do another show in a very few minutes. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank those of you who join us on a regular basis on this platform, Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. You know that the show is brought to you every week by the Black Sports Legends Foundation, HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative. It's also brought to you by the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC and the National Association of Blacks in Solar. We're hoping that we'll be able to get Think and some other sponsors to come on so we can get this done. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want you not to meet us back here, but to beat us back here as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now in the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Until next week, we say go in peace as we close another exciting edition